What's going on, guys? Doc Danny here with the PT Entrepreneur Podcast, and I'm very excited to have my friend and one of my business coaches, Jerred Moon from End of Three Fitness and Garage Gym Athlete, who's joined us today. Who's going to just drop a whole bunch of business knowledge on us. He's one of the smartest, in particular, digital business minded people that I've had a chance to work with. So I think you're going to get a lot out of this because he has some interesting experiences with physical therapy and having to use us in the past. So, Jerred, first of all, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Yeah, man, I'm pumped to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
It's easy. And I was just on your podcast like 4 days ago, right?
Yeah, just published too.
It did. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
No, I got to go share that. That was actually a lot of fun, man. We kind of get off on a tangent about entrepreneurship and how just different that can be. But here's what I want to start with. So we want to get into digital business today. I know you have a ton of information about digital business, but I think you have a really interesting background too. I mean, the way that you got to this was sort of, not necessarily a straight path. So if you wouldn't mind, take a couple minutes and just let everybody know like your background and how you ended up getting into owning a digital health and wellness business.
Yeah, man. So I do have kind of a interesting background. Had my all my plans worked out that I originally had for my life, I'd still very much be in the military, forcefully, because I'd still be on contract. Actually, what happened? I've been into fitness my whole life ever since I was a teenager. Really got into that stuff, and then I'd always had this idea that I kind of wanted to be a fighter pilot. And when I got to around end of high school, starting college, I had a conversation with my dad. I was like, which route should I go? Should I really pursue this fitness thing and try and, I don't know, be a personal trainer through college or whatever, or should I do the fighter pilot thing? And he had a very simple point. He's like, you could always do fitness later. He's like, you can never do the fighter pilot thing again. And so I'm like, you know what? That's right. So I went for that full force, actually ended up getting selected, passed all the tests, went through the program, ended up in pilot training, but also ended up getting hurt about 2 years into the program, and injured and medically disqualified from being able to fly anymore. And so I didn't really know what was next for me because, like I said, I would still be there. That the commitment for a pilot active duty is 10 years plus training. So 12 years.
Oh, wow. I didn't know it was that long.
Yeah. And that's just you being a pilot, not like, hey, we paid for your school. So it's just, if you want to be a pilot, this is the commitment, because they don't want to lose them too fast to the airlines.
Yeah.
And so I kind of didn't know what to do, but I was actually recovering from surgery when I kind of picked up or dusted off the idea to pursue fitness in some capacity again. Even though I had 2 years left on my active duty service commitment, I was like, I want to get into it. Now I know I can't get into any major way. So that's kind of where the digital thing came up. My wife and I were $100,000 in debt, primarily student loans, and then our cars. That was about it. We didn't have like shopping sprees with like, credit cards and all that stuff. Is student loans, and we both had a car, $100,000. You're welcome.
Yeah, that's a ton.
A ton of debt, and we wanted to work out of it. So I started End of Three Fitness on the side, 100% side hustle. Coached a lot in person, took a lot of opportunities in the military to coach and program, and then started End of Three Fitness side hustle. And man, it's just slowly grown to a more serious side hustle the further along active duty got, and then got out, pursued it full time. There's nothing easy about that, especially in the beginning. But I mean, long story short, that's what brings me from 2014 when I got out, which I think when you got out too, right? I think I got
June 2014.
Yeah, I got out a few months after you. So November technically. And then, man, that brings me all the way up to 2018. I've been doing End of Three Fitness for that amount of time.
So the transition for you, I mean, obviously that's a huge difference from Air Force fighter pilot training to then all of a sudden, now what the hell am I going to do? Because, I mean, they have very strict medical standards for that. You're flying a huge piece of machinery around that goes really fast. And I mean, they're very, very strict about, what they'll allow and what they won't. And that's also a sort of a long process to be medically discharged. You did have a little bit of time to kind of try to figure out what's going on. So what was the first kind of idea that you had, or viable digital business idea that you had that you were actually able to like make $1 online doing?
Yeah. So it was the first thing that I started, so I just started putting out a bunch of information because I was like, I'd kind of been like caged up mentally. Like I said, I was very passionate about fitness, but I couldn't do anything about it while I was in pilot training. So I was just started writing, putting out articles and stuff. But the real first thing that I did, viable business, was one-on-one coaching and digital, 100% digital, remote programming and coaching. And these are people I was just finding through putting out blog posts and stuff, started taking them on one at a time, to the point where it very quickly became too many people, like not because I was so awesome or I had marketing figured out. It just, to be honest, wasn't super challenging because a lot of people were looking for more structured CrossFit style at that time programming. And that's kind of been my thing for a long time. And so I started taking people one at a time until my limited bandwidth, because I was still full-time active duty. I couldn't handle it anymore. And that's when I started getting into programs and expanding, scaling, stuff like that, post-military. But while I was in the military, I was 100% individualized programming and coaching.
So when you were doing that, and I talk to students about this all the time. In fact, I was just talking to MGH University up in Boston via Zoom call. And that's one of the things that I told these students that I felt like they should look at trying to do, because, I went to PT school in the Army. So my job was to go to PT school. Like I was commissioned, and now granted they do condense it and you don't really, it's very intense. So it's a little bit more condensed than traditional PT school is, but still it's very demanding. And if I had gone to a civilian school, what my goal or my strategy was going to be to continue to do personal training, which I was doing while I was in undergrad, as I was going to do that as a little side business to make some money, because I just didn't want to be in a huge amount of debt. So when you started getting these people that were on the in digital programming, which just seems like it's such a better option from ability to do it from anywhere, what were these people like? What price points was this at? Like, what realistically were people willing to pay for digital programming, from a remote coach that they met online?
I ended up getting like a couple of different packages put together very quickly, because the first mistake you'll make, I think just when starting a business in general, if you don't truly value yourself, your time, or what you're doing, you're going to undercharge, right? And I know that's something that you talk about in business a lot, and other people doing, is just undercharging. And that was, I think I took on like 2 or 3 people really fast at like $49 a month, but this is $49 a month for like individualized. I'm reviewing the videos, I'm writing your programming. And it was very, very quickly, I was like, this is not fair. I'm not going to raise the price on these people, but that is not, not cool. So what I ended up doing was kind of 3 packages. I had $49 a month for kind of like a programming template that I would kind of run a lot of different people through if they just wanted to do that. Then I would have $150 a month, which didn't include as high touch like video reviews, but still calls and programming. And then the highest package was $300 a month. And that was for like full service, like, here's my cell phone number, text me before a workout and I'll get back to you, trying to give them the highest touch possible that I could at that time.
Yeah. It's funny it's a confidence level, I think in some cases you don't really know what or what people are willing to pay for. And, this is something that's, even with us, with the programming that our PTs, that they do, we're like, okay, well, this is what an hour's worth for you. This is roughly how long it's going to take. And for us, it's really in between $250 and $300 a month is what we're looking at. And if you really take a look out there, there's tons of different people that are charging, this comparable amount of money for digital programming that have very little background in much of anything, but have a strong social media presence, or they have, they're fit themselves, which I think is the other thing that's interesting.
Right.
Like, it's sort of like, I don't think Coach K can dunk a basketball, but he can like coach the hell out of a basketball team.
Right.
So just because somebody is fit and they have good genetics in some cases, or they just like to work out, doesn't necessarily mean they understand like the methodology of programming for somebody, especially if they have like injuries or something like that, or they take medication. It gets a little confusing and complex. So, for you, that programming business, like as on the side, was how helpful was that in terms of number one, with like student debt you guys had, but also how much time did that take up for you to actually be able to manage, 10, 20 people?
So first off, with the debt, it was awesome because we a ton of money doing that, right? So I was still active duty, lower officer. This is like first lieutenant, second lieutenant time frame. So not making the most money there. And then, taking on, I think most people signed up for that $150 option I was telling you about. Only a few people signed up for that $300, like one or two who wanted that high touch stuff. And then only a few really for the programming tip. Most people wanted that $150 mark. And so we got to a couple $1,000s. Maybe even like $1,000 to $2,000 a month or something like that. But what we were doing was aggressively paying off debt. And so if you've ever heard or familiar with Dave Ramsey, we were 100% doing his plan, and he has his book, The Total Money Makeover, and everything. So it was like something like 50% of my paycheck every month was going to debt. And then everything from Into 3 Fitness that it was making from digital programming was going to debt. And so we actually ended up paying off $100,000 worth of debt in 3 years. So
Dang.
It was there's a lot of discipline. Like sometimes I tell the story and people are like, oh, well, Into 3 Fitness just made a shit ton of money and you just paid off all your debt. It's like, no, it was like unbelievable discipline for me and my wife for 3 years with minimal side hustle income. Just 100% of it had to go to paying off debt. Now, what was the second part of that?
I forgot. What did I say? How much time did?
Oh, time.
Yeah. So how much time did those clients end up taking up for like legitimately side hustle? I'm thinking no more than probably 10, 15 hours a week of what you're, able to do.
It was, to be honest, it was brutal. I don't remember the exact amount I got to, but I found somewhere between 10 and 20 for a side hustle was like my limit. Yeah. And going back to that financial discipline, like my time discipline was pretty off the charts. Like I had to, there was no like get home, have a beer, watch a show, TV show or something like that. It was, okay, hang out with the wife and the kid for a little bit, and then kid goes to bed. Now I'm programming, doing this, reviewing videos. Probably, 10 to 15 hours per week minimum. But what I was also trying to do, I think if that's all you want to do, it wouldn't be terrible. Yeah. But I was also trying to build this business on the side. I was being intentional about that. So that took up a lot of time as well. That's why it's hard to estimate exactly. Like, I feel like every free second I had went into building the business as a side hustle back then. But just programming, probably 10, 15 hours a week.
And for you, the transition out of the military, still doing, programming, and then eventually leading into these one-off products, and then your more generalized garage gym athlete program. What's the origin of kind of all that? How'd that stuff come about?
What I noticed was, so the progression was I started building these programs and selling them for $49. They're all like one-man programs. One Man, One Barbell was the first one and the most popular. And the reason we built that was because I had all these athletes going through my individualized programming. But after so many athletes, I just started to realize, I was like, all of you need to go through a strength program. Like all of you. Because like if you're not strong enough, you can't correctly do energy system training. Like people misunderstand that sometimes. You can't actually get better at a lot of this stuff unless you have some sort of base level of strength. And so that's how I put together the strength program. And then that's kind of why I flipped to programs. Because I was like, I've done a lot of individualized programming now. What I realized 95% of you need is just to get stronger. So put together a strength program, started to sell that. And then once I started to realize is like just the convenience of that, like selling a program, I think it's actually a lot harder to sell a program than it is individualized programming for someone and being their coach. But if you can figure it out, if you put in the work and marketing and learning and stuff, it's well worth it because, you get a lot more time freedom.
Well, totally.
So I did. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, people want to work with somebody, right? Like,
right.
It's just no different between you and me with digital, or with coaching, business coaching. I guess perceived value of like somebody working with you versus you getting the information that person knows can be helpful, and then them going through it's slightly different. You're talking about the same thing for health and wellness, but it is significantly more scalable with your time, right?
Yeah. And that's it, ultimately what ended up happening. So I got, more free time, and then it rolled into Garage Gym Athlete because the just programming is like what I love to do. I'd be writing the kind of programming I'm writing, even if I didn't have a business doing it, just because that's what I truly enjoy, what I've studied a lot, and what I provide to people. And so it kind of kicked off. Garage Gym Athlete was 100% it was always going to be almost a side hustle within my business, because my one-off programs were doing really well. I was still doing some coaching, and that was fine. And so I was like, Garage Gym Athlete's going to be just kind of like a side hustle, so people can get they get an app, they get some awesome programming, and I'm going to do that. And then we hit some rough months, where promotions maybe didn't work as well, sales went down and all this stuff. And then what I realized was having a recurring revenue stream in a business is a pretty amazing thing, because if you're giving people a really good service and they're willing to pay for it, then your month-to-month income doesn't fluctuate so much. And so once I got a little taste of that and hit some bumps in the road initially in business, especially when I transitioned in 2014 to trying to go full time, that's when I was like, all right, I almost don't want to focus on selling programs anymore at all. I want to scale this as much as I can and get as many people in and help them as much as I can with really solid programming.
Well, the recurring stuff is phenomenal. And even doing individualized programming on let's say it's like a year-long contract, which I'm a big fan. I do not recommend anybody try to do just like 1 month of digital programming. It's a terrible idea, because that first month is actually the hardest month, where you're sort of like figuring out what that person's needs are and how to put it all together. So, for me, whenever I would do this stuff, I would always have a 12-month contract in place, because, you're right. Like that churn rate, or, maybe you can explain that a little bit better than I can, is, people that you're getting in versus people that you're losing. And, you're going to have them for a year. That's 12 months where you're going to get X amount of dollars per month. And you don't have to say, okay, it's January. What am I going to do for February? How am I going to find more new people? Which is something that we do in physical therapy all the time. And I think it's like a really poor decision for you not to have some sort of continuity option for your clients, right? And like, you would never do that now that you have a recurring revenue, business, and you have thousands of clients on this, Garage Gym Athlete platform, that if a few drop off, that's not that big of a deal. Like, it's not that significant of a problem for you. So what are the steps that you had to take to really get that in place, where you could say, all right, I can definitely build some sort of membership base around this?
Yeah. So the steps it took there were the first thing, and I think this is a common misconception, is the first thing you need is a really badass service and
Right.
willingness to serve your athletes. I think a lot of people have a great idea for like, oh yeah, I'll just throw some shit together and charge $25 a month. Yeah. It's like, it's not going to work, and it's not going to scale. And so once we actually started focusing all of our efforts on it, like customer support, how I interact with the athletes, I'm willing to, and we've talked about this before, like the highest membership tier that we have in Garage Gym Athlete is $47 a month. So there's 25 and 47. I'll still hop on calls with athletes and help them out, help them work through an injury, help them work through traveling or, diet stuff and all these things. And most people be like, well, man, that's not a lot of money for a phone call. And it's like, man, you have to really invest yourself. Like the minute you start getting too important, I really don't think that you're going to have a viable business anymore. And so, there are certain things, protect your time, scale, smartly and everything. But so we decided to go all in, and that's really when the business started to grow, because we focused on just putting together the best service possible. And then after that, I just had to figure out math. There's a lot of math I had to figure out on, you mentioned churn rate, like how many people are leaving versus how many people are coming in. And that has taken, almost up. I'm not saying we have it all figured out, but it wasn't until probably end of last year that we started to finally like understand the math and how to, how long members stay versus, how much you can pay for a customer and all these things and new athlete and all that. It's a lot of work, but very scalable once you learn it.
So you talk about a service, right? And having this really dialed in product. It sounds like that from a retention standpoint, like that's That's really important. So what do you think the elements are of having a really good digital, I mean, it's a service, not necessarily a product. So what are the elements of a really good digital service in the health and wellness niche in particular?
So I've done the research on this. So the typical health and wellness monthly service for like workouts, the typical stick rate is 2 to 3 months.
Right.
So, I mean, people are staying 60 to 90 days before they're piecing out. Our average right now is closer to 12 months. And the way we do that is just constant community. So we're really active in the Facebook group. That's one thing that's really important, doing Facebook Lives, interacting with your members, constant touches. So a lot of email. Like we send out a ton of email multiple times per week to our athletes. Because another thing, misconception is some people want to it's like, okay, we're connected to their bank account now. Like, just maybe if we don't say that much, it'll just keep hitting,
they'll forget about it.
They'll forget about it. Like, I feel like some people think that was just a horrible mindset to have just in business in general. So we communicate a lot with our athletes. There's no way how did I get signed up for this? Because, and so we do that. We do a webinar every single month covering a new topic, and that's me doing the webinar. So either on nutrition, on programming, on what's coming up and stuff like that. So just having them really engaged and trying to really, I've been around a lot of gym owners, box owners who've done really well, trying to mimic a more CrossFit community atmosphere as much as I can online is what I'm really trying to do. And I'm talking about modeling the best businesses I've seen in doing that.
Yeah, that is one thing they do amazingly well is they have a community. I mean, there's pros and cons of CrossFit gym too, right? Then everybody is sort of like in each other's business sometimes, or the coach is dating this athlete, then they broke up, and then it's I love it. CrossFit gyms get a little weird, man. Everybody takes their clothes off around each other, and it's fun. Like back in the day, whenever I got into it, it's like 2009. It was it was like a breeding ground in a CrossFit gym. But they do an amazing job with community. I mean, you have barbecues, and you don't see somebody for a while. You're like, dude, where you been, man? What the hell is wrong with you? You're not doing the right things for yourself, or oh, you've been traveling, where it's at, or you typically hang out longer, before and after your workout than you do the actual workout. So, that's cool. And the ability to do that online in groups is really unique. The retention of them is huge, but in many cases, people out there are probably thinking, okay, this is cool. You have an awesome product and you've got all this experience and you guys are retaining people. I just want to get a couple people. How do I get to the point where I can make an extra, let's say $1,000 online? Where do I find these people?
Yeah. And that's, I kind of shared a story with you before, we were talking recently, and I think I'll share the same one. Cause I had a buddy who was in a similar situation. He wanted to do something online, and he didn't really know where to start. Now trying to I think everyone should start with really, high touch in-person stuff, no matter what you're doing. If you want to do something online, that way you can you learn a lot more about your potential customer or athlete, and you learn what works, what doesn't work. And that's what I had him do. So I basically kind of coached him on just setting up some really basic stuff of doing Facebook Lives and these workouts and everything. And what he ended up doing was creating a closed Facebook group and doing live workouts every single morning. And I think how he enticed people was just he gave his first couple away for free, just on his Facebook feed. And then he's like, okay, he normally does groups, whatever, $149 a month for 3 months. And, this is not as in touch. He has some higher in touch stuff that he does as well. But for that initial thing that he did was just a cheaper service. You can be at home. You don't need any equipment. Watch my video. Do what I say. Do as I do while I'm doing it, because it's live, which I thought was really cool. And he never got into Facebook ads or Google AdWords or anything special. He just did that from his own social media accounts. And he doesn't have, honestly, I think his Instagram following is less than 500 people. And I'm not trying to beat anyone down for their Instagram following. I'm just saying, you're mentioning popular fitness people start, if you have 100,000 people following you on Instagram and you don't already have $1 million business, then something's wrong with you. It's normally, it should be that easy if you have a massive following, but even if you have a small following, you only need a couple of people, right, to get started.
True.
And then after that, there are ways to blow it up with marketing and advertising, which we could really dive into. But for getting started, I mean, look inside your own communities, places that you're at, Facebook groups that are public that you can message a few people, be really helpful in those groups, be, helpful in general with people you interact with, and, invite people to your service, and don't be afraid to sell it. And that's a big thing right there, is don't be afraid to sell your service if you truly believe in it.
Yeah. I love the kind of guerrilla marketing strategy with Facebook where, you want to be like extremely helpful in groups where there's people that are, potential clients of yours, right? So it's an easy way to get kicked out of Facebook groups if you just go in and put links to the application to work with you in every comment that you put. Like
that'll get you kicked out real fast. Yeah,
you'll get blocked super fast. But if you're just like answer their question in detail, and then on your personal page, if you can make your page a banner for the shit that you actually do, like take the background and say like, digital programming, whatever your little business is. People will go to your page if you leave a comment that's helpful, and they'll be like, oh, who's this guy? And they'll realize that you do some other things. And that's a really good way to, for free, really get, people in the door. The other thing I would totally agree with is the fact that one-on-one stuff is the way to go. That's what I did with programming whenever I first started. That's what I did with business coaching. It was basically, hey, this is the experience I have. I may not know everything, but I think I know more than many of you that are getting started. This is where we've been able to get to. If you want to jump on a consulting call to, kind of help save you some time and figure out the right things you should work on, let's do that. And it was just one-off stuff. It was just, okay, cool. We're going to work, 1 hour. Maybe we talk again in a couple months or something. But super simple. And I think that's the best way to go about it. And what I learned from that is just like programming, right? What you learned, everybody just needs to be stronger. It's like, okay, well, everybody needs to raise their prices. No one knows how to market, and no one has any organization systems to their business. So then all of a sudden we can create these leverageable programs. So, for you, if you're looking at some of these more advanced strategies, so let's say you've done those things and maybe you got a couple people that you've worked with, what have you found to be the most, effective return on investment from a digital marketing strategy? I know this is sort of a broad question, but like if you could pick one thing to have people start to do from digital marketing standpoint, what would it be?
Could I say Facebook advertising, or would you want me to dive a little bit deeper?
I think you could say that, but I would also like to know in Facebook advertising, which is just like, a huge amount of potential things you could do there. What in particular in Facebook advertising have you found to be maybe even surprisingly more successful than you thought?
Yeah, so I'll share a few different things with Facebook advertising because, as you know, I'm really big on numbers. I track absolutely everything. Like there's not anything I've ever done in recent history where I don't know the ROI on it. And one thing that's really surprised me recently was we run a ton of ads on Facebook just to content, like straight content. Like here's an article, how to get stronger. There's no call to action in the content to sell people something. There's not even a link to any of my programs. It's just an article I wrote because that's what I did for a long time. I've written millions of words online. And so I just linked to those. What I'm really doing is trying to build an audience, right? You can't just go out there and like see a person on the street and ask them to buy something, right? You have to kind of introduce yourself first. So we run a lot of content ads. I thought for a long time that we were just eating that cost. Like before we started tracking really in depth, I was like, you know what? I'm probably spending way too much money on these content ads and maybe not making any money back, directly off of these, but it will come back to us in the long run. But we found out over the last 6 months, it's getting close to a 30% ROI, which isn't like this crazy stuff you hear on Facebook, like 1,500% ROI. I spent $7 and got 70 clients, all this like one-off stuff they did one time. But that's over the last 6 months just because that's how long our tracking software goes back. And so that's crazy to me because it's just content ads. Now, the other things that we've seen, triple digit and above our percent ROIs, simple things like retargeting. Mm-hmm. So someone hits a sales page, someone hits a landing page. They don't want to buy right away. Maybe they're busy, whatever. Retargeting those people to come back later, sign up, maybe even give a discount after a certain amount of time. Those are the two main ways to be successful, I think, in Facebook advertising, at least right now.
Facebook, it sounds like obviously is the big thing for you guys. Is there anything else in terms of digital marketing or content that you're bullish on, I should say? I mean, you have like 2 podcasts?
Yeah. So we have the Garage Gym Athlete podcast and the Better Humanology podcast. I would say content in general to like make that in kind of tying that back into Facebook because we're pretty good at SEO. And that was because when I was in the military, I didn't have any money to put towards Facebook advertising, or at least I didn't think I did. I didn't know anything in return. So I just had to get really good at search engine optimization with Google, which can be a roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
And then podcasting. So putting out a ton of content, being as helpful as you can, like we're doing here, like I am in my podcast, you've been in other podcasts and stuff, is really just helps people, you're a good person, you have integrity, that you are really here to help people, but other people don't really know that. And they're not going to get that from a sales page because it's a sales page,
Yeah.
So they need something like articles to kind of get to know your personality, or podcasts to get to know who you are, what kind of person you really are, how you handle business. And I think that's a big part of it. It's not really necessarily a marketing strategy, even though it is. It's really just helping potential athletes or customers get to know you a little bit better. I have friends who do, smaller podcasts just for their CrossFit gym. And, just for their members, but other people in the community, they share it and pick it up. And then they get new members from that. They're like, yeah, I started listening to your podcast because so-and-so told me to. And it's just a great way for people to get to know who you are.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I totally agree with you too. Like it's very easy for me to convince someone in person that I have their best interests in mind, right? Like if someone comes to me as a patient and I say, look, I see people like you all the time. I can help you get over your back pain and get you back to X, Y, and Z. And I'm face to face with you. There's inherent trust there. You see my, practice. You see like our dog walking around downstairs in the business. Like we're humans, right? Online, it's very hard because it's so easy to not be, genuine. And it is one of those things that I do think formats like this really help with people understanding, that you are a human being. And if we were to bump into each other, I don't know if you get this a lot, but like for me, when I meet people at conferences and stuff, like one of the most common things is for them to just say like, oh, I listen to your podcast, or you sound just like you do on your podcast, or you're taller than I thought on your podcast.
Right.
I thought you were shorter, and I'm like, how'd you think I was any height on podcast? But like, you get that. I feel like this format in particular is just so, I don't know, it's relatable. It's in your ear. It's, it's right there into the brain. I found it to be a way for me to help to relate to people online, which is really hard to do.
Yeah, it's really, really difficult. And it was probably going back into like early 2000s into the 90s with direct response marketers, right? With every scam way that they found out to advertise and stuff, burnt out like the entire nation, at least US, on internet sales in general. And so I really feel like we're in a new era right now because Facebook and Google algorithms don't even like favor those type of shysters anymore. Like they'll shut your advertising down. They won't show it to people. There's just the world is moving in a better direction for internet business, to be honest. Like it's going to be harder and harder to get ripped off in the internet world, which is going to be great for consumer confidence level.
So I have kind of two more questions for you in terms of digital business, and they sort of go, well, I guess they go hand in hand. One is, what are the pros, or what are your favorite elements of having a digital business? And on the flip side of that, what are the negatives that you found associated with it?
Yeah. So pros, what's so funny is, so you have a brick and mortar business, but you also have a digital business. And I've been a part of a lot of different masterminds over the years. And I always try to get in masterminds that are actually a little bit outside of my area, either a business coach who's not directly in my niche, or, maybe I go into a brick and mortar mastermind, even though they're not doing as much digital stuff, to learn some things that I can. And one thing I have learned about brick and mortar people, and I don't know if that's primarily, and because you have a digital business too, but primarily your audience, is they think the digital side is just so easy.
Oh, people think that shit all the time. It's so frustrating. There's like, oh, you know what? I just need to come up with a digital program, and then I'm just going to go hiking and make money while I'm hiking. We're like, dude, you don't understand the complexity involved.
Right.
To be able to get to that point, like, it takes forever.
So that's where I'm going to start, and that's going to be with your con of having an online business as opposed to starting with a pro is it is an unbelievable amount of work.
Yeah.
And I really feel that you have to build a brand. I think the days where you just slap something together and push it out there they're pretty much gone. Like, you have to have a brand. That sounds a little bit scary. I'm not saying you have to have this massive company. I'm just saying you have to have some sort of personal brand, going back to people trusting you. And, you have a reputation for putting out quality stuff and you're a business with integrity. You have to have some sort of brand. And building a brand is about as scientific, as, thinking about what you're going to eat for breakfast. There's no real concrete anything. You just pick, I could do this or I could do this. There's so many different options for quote unquote branding. And that's why a lot of marketing people hate the term branding. But the best way to build a brand is to have a lot of sales. So you have to get good at the marketing thing, which is also very, very challenging thing to do. So those are the cons. It's a lot of work, a lot of misconceptions about how much work it actually is. I had one of the brick and mortar guys say to me, when I was in that mastermind, he's like, must be nice to just be able to blast a Facebook ad to the entire world and people just buy. And I'm like, that would be the most expensive Facebook ad on the planet if I just blasted it out to everyone, people who aren't even interested in fitness.
Yeah.
That's not how it works. And then I said the same thing to him. I was like, well, it must be nice to just have one city to focus all my advertising in, for my brick and mortar business. So there is no grass is greener on the other side. It's just difficult stuff. Now the con, because I've been working really hard at building the business. I'm kind of a nerd, like I said, with numbers and systems and processes. And I've been working really hard over the last 7 months in building a team and having a good team. So I am finally, technically, 7 years into online business, I'm starting to see the internet freedom. It's taken this long though, that, I could have a ton of freedom with my time, and the business will still grow because I have the right people in place, the right systems in place, the right processes in place. And that's something I've been working with a business coach on for most of this year. And so I'm starting to see a lot more freedom, and that's definitely the best part of it for me.
And that's something you can do in a brick and mortar business. Like for me, my patient schedule, I'm there 10 hours a week. I technically don't need to be there if I don't want to at this point. And it's not, I just enjoy working with people in that capacity. And I don't feel like it's something I want to give up just yet. But if I, let's say I somehow broke both my hands. I hope this doesn't happen. That would suck. But, and I couldn't actually work with people. I wouldn't need to, and I could take a step back and do other roles or disconnect from the business to some degree. But yeah, I think there's just this common Tim Ferriss 4-hour work week kind of approach, right, where everybody just thinks I'm gonna have this drop ship business, and then I'm gonna go travel around India, and I check my phone and I've got all this money that I made. It's that's a fairy tale, guys. That's not how it works. Coming from two people that own digital businesses, I can tell you, I own a digital business and I own a brick and mortar business, and the digital business is harder than the brick and mortar business. It's more challenging to get going. And there's pros and cons to both, but it is something I do think personally, having some element of both is actually incredibly safe in terms of our financial consistency, because fluctuations in one or the other are typically evened out really well. So I think it fits really well with the physical therapy, niche, in terms of, you went to school for 7 years to work with people one-on-one. And that's cool. That's a great way to work with them. But man, if you had a little digital piece to what you're doing, that when you go on vacation, yeah, you're still making money in some capacity, or you take it with you in some way. I think that's huge. So, first of all, man, I really appreciate your time. This has been awesome. I think that I get so many questions about digital business. This may be, a part 2 that we need to have, where we can talk about some of the questions that I'm sure we'll get from this podcast. But if you could leave everybody with a parting shot of, hey, if you're interested in digital business, what's the one thing they should focus on now to kind of lay the groundwork? What would it be?
I'd give 2 things. One is you have to study marketing, as marketing and sales, as in the digital space. Once I realized that was going to have to be my primary job, you can't You can't farm that out. You can't
Right.
hire a $5 an hour VA from the Philippines to do that for you.
Yeah.
Like, you have to learn, and that has to be your job. Like, I have people who help me with programming, coaching, everything, every other aspect, email in my business, except for I basically get no help unless I pay for it, marketing. And, that's just because I've learned it. I've studied it. I know it really well now. And it's not a bad word to me anymore. And I feel like it is kind of in the health and space. Sometimes people, they feel that it's bad, but I really think that if you have a product or service you truly believe into your inner core, why would you not want as many people to know about it as possible? And then the second thing I always coach people on is know your numbers. There's so many people who just kind of throw a blind eye. I mean, this could go to business in general, but it really applies to digital. Like, you really should know every number inside your business. And if you don't know which numbers you should know, maybe start there, find out which ones that you should know. It should start with basic, profit and loss stuff, but really getting into conversion rates. And that's the only way you're going to know if you're successful or if you're scalable, is start getting good at the math now before you find out what you're doing is not viable or scalable. So marketing and math, man, my two parting shots.
I would say I'll add on to that a little bit is get some help too. And I can tell you from somebody that I've worked with personally, the digital space is just very challenging. I've had business coaches in, both brick and mortar and digital. And if looking for people that have special kind of understandings of certain areas, I think can be really helpful. And just being willing to reinvest in yourself, because, if it wasn't for the help that we got, that Joe and I got from you with Doc and Jock, we wouldn't have been able to have a product that we created and we're able to monetize with that podcast. And then also, whenever we worked together to help me implement a training program within our physical therapy practice, that was huge because it saved me so much time. And this is something that I get very frustrated with our profession, or sometimes people in general, is they're very willing to spend 10 times as much time to try to figure out something that somebody else has already figured out how to do better than them. And yet they're unwilling to invest in themselves. And so I'm glad that I had a chance to introduce you to everybody here. I would definitely say, I don't know, Jerred, I don't know if you're taking new clients or not, but if you're interested in, a digital business, I've had an awesome experience with Jerred, and he's been an amazing business coach that I'm sure I'll use in the future as we continue to scale and grow. But I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your story and the information that you have.
Yeah, man. Anytime. Happy to do it again. It's been a blast.
Cool. All right, guys. As always, thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.